Welcome back to another episode of BestowCast, and we are continuing with Yo Joe June, and we're still in June. For tonight's episode, we are talking about, or I am talking about, G.I. Joe Resolute. This was a movie, apparently I loved this movie so much I ended up buying it 3 different times on 3 separate occasions. The first time was, after I had discovered it, I had bought it for myself to watch it from beginning to end. The second time was after I had loaned it to someone and it never came back. The third time was after I had loaned it to somebody else and it never came back. So those other people really enjoyed G.I. Joe Resolute. And obviously, this last time that I purchased it, I didn't even take it out of its wrapper. I actually had to just break the wrapper to review it right before recording this episode. Now, this one's going to be a little bit of a cheat. This is a movie that wasn't in theaters or could potentially be in theaters. I was trying to do Yo Joe June, where I was going to stray away from shows like Revenge of Cobra or The Mass Device or Rise of Pentor Rise, and just kind of focus on things that would have been in theaters, if G.I. Joe the movie would have been in theaters to begin with, but it was intended to be in theaters. G.I. Joe Resolute wasn't really anything that ever was intended to be in theaters, and I guess this kind of falls along the lines where I kind of remember like G.I. Joe Extreme and G.I. Joe Sigma 6 and some of the other ones where they kind of had, I think like when they came out with like a set, they would come out with like a DVD that went with it, and it was kind of they were trying to springboard the next generation of G.I. Joe, a new iteration of G.I. Joe, whether it was a pass fail or other in between. But I'm going to give this one a little bit of a pass. I originally had thought that this was made for Adult Swim. I don't know, for many years I thought this was Adult Swim because I caught this much later. I know that there were a series of shorts, but I always assumed that the shorts were made and like aired in between. It was aired on Adult Swim and it was just aired in between, going to commercial break and coming back, or airing in between episodes. An episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force and Cowboy Bebop, and maybe we get a G.I. Joe Resolute episode. But after doing some research for this episode, it turns out that it was not so true. It was actually for the Adult Swim. I mean, it's true in fact that it was made for Adult Swim, but I don't think it ever aired on TV. It actually went to their Adult Swim website, and let's see here, 2009. They're actually a bunch of shorts. They're not too long. They don't overstay their welcome, and they add up to a complete story arc, which is actually kind of really nice. I mean, it's not. I don't really find, rewatching this, I don't find it jarring that it's like 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and then the last episode I think is 10 minutes. Whereas everything just kind of flows into it, and I feel like each 5 minutes kind of just like tells its story. So like, if you were to watch like an episode of G.I. Joe or an episode of just any television show, that it's like, it's just 5 minutes with a certain setting, 5 minutes with the next setting, but it still adds to the overall story. Back forth, maybe a third setting. Maybe we got the whole dealings with G.I. Joe discovering that Cobra's back, Cobra launching their attack. Maybe Cobra Commander's point of view, and then we get like the Snake Eyes Storm Shadow kind of storyline as well. And I really like it. I discovered, like I said, I discovered it late. I found it on the Yoo-Hoo Tubes. I didn't even find it on the Adult Swim website. I found it on the Yoo-Hoo Tubes, and I eventually ended up discovering that it was available on DVD, and did purchase it on DVD, like I said, 3 times. Mainly because I kind of felt like, when you watch stuff on Yoo-Hoo Tubes, back in the day, it didn't necessarily mean that you got the complete story. And sometimes I felt like, well, maybe something felt missing, or maybe I was missing something, or so there was something maybe I didn't understand. And I just and ultimately it's like I kind of really wanted to reward them for a job well done. I reward if my favorite Yoo-Hoo tubers make DVDs, I buy physical media of the DVDs. I try to support my Yoo-Hoo tubers. So I try to support Hasbro by actually buying Resolute. Really has a theme to it. I when it was over, I wanted more of it, and I kind of felt like this was kind of a story setting maybe that was supposed to launch a toy line, maybe launch a toy line. I know there was a GI Joe Resolute toy line. I don't know how directly tied in the toy line was to this particular show. Like if it came, I don't know if the toy line dropped at the same time, or if it's more like a nostalgia kind of thing where it's like, because I know like 25th anniversary came out and they dropped a lot of stuff retroactively. So I know believe there's like I've seen carded Cobra Commander on a GI Joe Resolute packaging. I do know that there were collected sets, that there was a collected team of Joes and a collected team of Cobra that were action figures. But I don't know how closely it came tied to this series when it dropped. Because there's a lot of stuff going on here where I don't know if this is before or after the Rise of Cobra, which is the live action movie that came out. And there's a few elements that are in there that kind of tie to the live action TV. Or the live action movie, rather. I don't know if this is in promotion of one or the other. Again, I don't know if this was the intention was that Resolute was going to be the spin-off and be on TV if the movie had succeeded. I don't recall if Rise of Cobra was a success. In my memory banks, I think it was a failure. It wasn't big enough of a failure to not get a sequel, but it still, I don't think it did super well. I do kind of have the feeling that GI Joe Renegades did kind of fill in that spot where I don't know when Renegades came out in relation to Rise of Cobra or Retaliation. But I kind of feel like that Renegades, even though that was a very, very different take on G.I. Joe, I kind of feel like that was tied to the live action movies. Again, another property I discovered way down the line and actually enjoyed, and then find out it's canceled after one season, which is like, oh, that's just a bummer. But back to Resolute. So one of the things I do like about G.I. Joe, the animated stuff, or as a property, and I kind of wish that they would do this a little bit more so, is that sometimes every generation seems to be its own thing. So in the 80s, we had the Real American Hero. Resolute seems to be a little bit of its own thing. Renegades is definitely its own thing. The more modern stuff, there's no real properties out that tie into the modern stuff, but there is storytelling behind the actual action figures, which I would hope that would actually get collected and put out there at some point. But yeah, it seems like even the background stories to the modern stuff has its own background to it, its own kind of reboot. And I kind of wish it would go along the way of like, I was thinking about this today where TMNT does that, where it's like every generation of TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, always seems to kind of reboot itself and kind of like change a little bit of the background, or try to, it reboots and then it goes in a new direction, and it may like retell or reconfigure older stories, but then it also tries to go on its own path, and I kind of like that about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where it's not always the same thing. It's always rebooted, and I always feel like the comic books kind of did that. And I don't know for sure if it's like this, but I always felt like every issue one of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic book starts its own continuity, and it kind of tells its story within its own continuity. One of the things where it's like Marvel never really does this, or DC never does this, where they always dropped a number one because number one just sold and made money. It never really rebooted the universe. They just would drop a number one just because, oh, we need a couple bucks in the coffer. We're gonna drop a number one this month, just to make a couple more bucks. We need a number one Spider-Man to come back out, and 7 copies of that cover. Versus I feel like when Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles does this, where they drop it in the number one, it's a number one in a new line of story where it just kind of reboots the universe and retells it. And I kind of appreciate that when it comes to Turtles. And I don't know, I kind of feel like G.I. Joe is kind of like that. I know a lot of people are nostalgia based, where it's like, it's only Real American Hero, even though like there was G.I. Joe before Real American Hero. I personally kind of like the way that the movies went, where the G.I. Joe was a worldwide task force, that it wasn't necessarily an American team. It was just a world, we've got people from all around the world, and we're fighting this terrorist organization. We're coming together. And I always like that idea, and that actually fits with our modern sensibilities when it comes to like diversity and everything. Everybody's coming together to fight against the common enemy. And I kind of like that kind of idea when it comes to G.I. Joe. Now, I don't know if that's reflected in the comics or not. Like I said in the last episode, I haven't really read many modern comics, but I kind of get the impression that they were building their own world. And it was not too terribly long before this episode of the podcast, they have announced that Skybound Image, under the tutelage of Robert Kirkman, will be doing a G.I. Joe and a Transformers shared universe in the comic books. Reboot or retelling, or are they adding on? Because Larry Hama is actually doing the writing, who wrote the comics. He wrote the Marvel comics, and when the comics moved over, now I know they moved it several times. They were to several different companies, but I think even with the last company, they were still, Larry Hama was still writing. But I don't know if Larry Hama was writing from the Marvel continuity or if they rebooted it. And I don't know if the Skybound stuff will be Larry Hama writing the IDW continuity, or if they're just going to reboot that again from scratch, and then just one of the greater writers of this brand will continue to write for that new series. I do not know that whether or not that's true or not, because I kind of find out like Generation 1 Transformers did that, where Generation 1 Transformers had the Marvel continuity. And then I think they went to Boom Studios and then IDW. And I don't know. I can't speak for the Boom Studios, but I'm pretty sure like the IDW stuff was the continued universe. They continued the stories that were from the Marvel comics to kind of finish, because I think the Marvel comic stuff got canceled before their story arcs ever finished. So they finished them in another comic, in another publisher. I guess we would go with that. We should go with that because that's right. I am not completely familiar, because I think this was a one-shot thing, so I don't know if there was a comic book universe or comic book stories that featured Resolute. I kind of wish that there was. So one of the things that I really liked about Resolute was that it's an adult, because it was Adult Swim, so it kind of had an adult theme. Like this show was catering to the nostalgia of the Real American Heroes 80s kids, where we had a lot of the characters, and again, this is kind of a rebooted universe. It's doing its own thing, but then it's also applying, implying things that may have carried over from the comic books or from the 80s cartoon or whatever. I guess like that stuff still holds true to this universe, because there's a point in time when Snake Eyes goes on a mission to fight against Storm Shadow, and Duke asks Scarlet, he's which are you going to do? Are you going to go with Snake Eyes and with his mission, or are you going to stick with me? And it kind of implies there was kind of like a romantic a romance trio, a triangle, a diamond. I'm trying to use like Riley got mad at me because I was talking about a triangle and I kept saying a diamond. She got mad at me because a triangle's not a diamond. So let's see here. A love acute angle. No. Let's ditch that idea. It was a love triangle. It implies the love triangle between Duke, Scarlet, and Snake Eyes, which is another thing. It's never really explored in the series, so it's just something that's heavily implied from previous iterations of the series. Other thing, like I said, is like it's very adult, meaning that characters die. We start on the first episode, and right away, Major Blood dies. Is there a rebooted thing, or are we supposed to take take stuff from the previous universe, because my understanding is in the previous universe, like Major Blood and Cobra Commander don't really get along. Major Blood aligns himself with Mars Industries, which is part of Destro, and Destro doesn't necessarily get along with Cobra Commander. It's kind of a thing that I like about when it comes to the Cobra entity, because there's all these subsections of Cobra. There's, the Cobra battalion itself. There's like, the Dreadnoughts. There's Mars Industries. So like there's all these different like subsections, and they don't necessarily get along too well. They kind of sometimes end up at odds. Even once you start getting Serpentor, then Serpentor and Cobra Commander don't necessarily see eye to eye either. And I was kind of wondering if that was kind of the thing that they were trying to get at with Resolute, where Cobra Commander and Mars Industries don't necessarily get along. But we have, the Baroness and Destro actually running a mission and doing really well on their mission for Cobra Commander. So it doesn't really explicitly go into detail. But yeah, we get deaths. We get, Gung Ho, or not Gung Ho. We get Bazooka's death at the hands of, assumed at the hands of Storm Shadow, because he leaves a message in his gullet to Snake Eyes. So it's just something where it's like, oh, well, that's a line that's never crossed. They never get there in any like the old like G.I. Joe cartoons or anything. That was always, for parental reasons and for children reasons. It makes sense when it's a kiddie flick. When this is kind of geared towards adults, where there's like, there are a little bit more real world stakes. The bad guy is not going to get away at the end or turn out to be a robot, because we can destroy robots. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, where it's like every 80s cartoon always had a robot. I mean, I'm probably like mansplaining or dadsplaining something, but I always noticed this with a kid, where it's like, oh, the Foot Clan were always robots. So when the Turtles destroyed them, or fought them, they always took out the robots, because it was okay to kill or destroy robots. Same with G.I. Joe. We eventually get the bats, and it's okay to destroy the bats. We can break down and shoot the bats. We just can't shoot troopers. Even still, like even G.I. Joe the movie. I mean, technically we still have Duke's death, but that's about it. We don't really get anybody else on screen. We don't get a slaughter like we do with Transformers the movie, where it's like everybody gets shot down in the beginning. I mean, maybe that's why it never aired on TV. Maybe that's why it never made it onto Adult Swim proper, as far as I know. Maybe because it deals with a little bit more adult subjects. But I think that it would be proper for Adult Swim, televised, not Adult Swim online, because they kind of did those kind of things. They ran Cowboy Bebop for years, and that deals with a lot of adult subjects and adult tones. So I don't know. It ends in a cliffhanger. It ends where, not necessarily cliffhanger. I mean, the Joes win in the end, but Cobra Commander is never not to be found. He seemingly escaped, leading us to believe that he will come again to fight another day, for a sequel that never happened. And I really wish that there were more sequels. I would have loved to see a little bit more of this, even if it was just directly to online. My God, like looking over the Wikipedia, or looking over like even the Internet Movie Database, it's like 5 people that worked on this project. It was a very, very small team that kind of put it together. I guess if they were to move on, they would probably have to expand that team a little bit more. But I mean, our main cast are 4 people, and I'm sitting here spreading the love on Cowboy Bebop. I have mentioned it twice in this episode. The third time is going to be that Steve Bloom is the voice of Duke, Roadblock, Wild Bill, Ripcord, Zartan, Doc, an operator, and technician. We get Spike as Duke. We get Wolverine as Duke. He did Wolverine in one of the iterations. Others is yeah. 3, 2, 1. Others include like Charlie. God damn, how can I not say this? Others include Charlie Adler. Hey, I finally did it. It took a couple takes that didn't make the cut, but Charlie Adler is one of them. He provided the voice of Cobra Commander, Stock, Flint, Gung Ho, Hardmaster, and Cop. Charlie Adler, it's amazing when after, I looked up the cast and crew before doing the viewing this time, because it's like I didn't really know who did what. And to see Charlie Adler's name on there, and it's just like, oh, cow and chicken. He's doing the voice of Cobra Commander. You really don't you don't recognize him whatsoever, or at least for me, I don't recognize the voice as Cobra Commander. He did a really good job. I gotta praise him. Eric, and I'm gonna probably mispronounce this. I apologize. Bezua, Bauza, Bazua. Comment wherever you can comment whether or not I said that right. But yeah, he did let's see here. Voice actor including Ren and Stimpy, Adult Party Clue, Foop on Fairly Odd Parents, Thunderbolt Ross on Iron Man, and Fozzie Bear on Muppet Babies. Other characters include Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Marvy the Martian, Pepe Le Pew, Tweety, Speedy Gonzales, Henry Hawk, Barnyard Dog, Woody Woodpecker, Boo Boo Bear, Adam Ant, Luke Skywalker, and Dino. Holy crap, he's got a huge list of names. But most of them are I'm assuming the more modern rebooted stuff. I give this guy praise, even though I don't really know this guy, but maybe you guys know. Maybe you recognize him. Most notably includes Stimpy on Ren and Stimpy's Adult Party cartoon. That one seems to be, that's usually a black eye when it comes to Ren and Stimpy enthusiasts. Then we got Gray Delisi. Here we go. Gosh, I'm sorry. Delisle Delicey. Most notably, Russie Taylor, who provided a lot of the voices on The Simpsons. After she had passed away, Gray had stepped in. She provides the voice of Martin, Prince, and Sherry and Terry's voices in The Simpsons. So that's the notable roles that you may know her from. Now I got to rank this from 1 to Cats. 1 being the best, and Cats being way down there, bottom of the barrel. So the next step up from Cats would be 3. I think so far we ranked G.I. Joe the movie at the number 3 tier. So right now there's nothing at 1, there's nothing at 2. We got G.I. Joe the movie at 3, and we have Cats. I don't rank this with Cats. I don't think I ranked this with G.I. Joe the movie either. Even though there's no nostalgia for this in comparison to G.I. Joe the movie for me, I still really like this. I really like the story. I really like that this is the way that the live action stuff, the live action stuff should have taken a cue from this. Or even G.I. Joe the movie should have taken a cue from this. This was really, really well made. Again, like I said, they were a bunch of 5-minute episodes strung together, and I don't feel like I'm watching, this is 5 minutes, so this is 5 minutes, and this is 5 minutes. I just feel like when I put this in, I'm watching an entire movie, and they all fit together seamlessly. They did a really good job making them stitch together seamlessly. So I would put it either at number 1 or number 2. Let me see here. Let me think a second. Let me think about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm actually going to put this on number 1. So far in our rankings of 1 to Cats, G.I. Joe Resolute will be the number 1 spot. Number 2 is still open. Nothing else is there. Number 3 will be G.I. Joe the movie, and then Cats. Please shout out where you are listening to this show from. What platform do you listen to it? Do you listen to it Spotify? Do you listen to it on iTunes? Do you listen to it on YouTube? Do you listen to it on Amazon Music? Comment wherever you can comment. Tell me where you've listened to this, and tell me if you've enjoyed G.I. Joe Resolute, or if you've never heard of it before. Go get it. Go get it. Get it right now. As a matter of fact, I'll see if I can put an Amazon link within the description, and maybe you can support the show and watch G.I. Joe Resolute at the same time. Sounds like a great plan, but yeah, I mean, I highly recommend it. One of my favorite reiterations of the Joe platform, and there's more to come with some more Yo Joe June. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening. Catch you next time.